Welcome to the Wellness in Every Season of Motherhood podcast, where we explore what it means to achieve total wellness. I am your host, Autumn Carter. This podcast is geared more towards mothers, but we try to be inclusive of all here as we learn together to get us out of survival mode and into thriving during life transitions. This is episode 4, Welcome Wellness Wanderers. Today we will be discussing spiritual wellness with life and spiritual coach Marcie Reznik. We will discuss why she thinks spiritual health is important, how her spiritual health has positively affected her perspective, career, and life choices. We discuss how it ties into other areas of wellness, the signs of neglecting spiritual health, what she does to check in on her spiritual wellness, how others can strengthen theirs and prevent a deficit in this area, among other things. So stay tuned. This is a longer episode than planned because we go deep, and I have questions for you at the end to self-assess where you are a little bit weaker and need to strengthen areas and where you are doing just fine. Today I have Marcie Reznik. She is a life and spiritual coach. I'm going to let her take it away and tell you a little bit about herself and where you can find her.
Hi, my name is Marcie, and I am a life and spiritual coach. I'm based in Michigan. I have been in the beauty industry for 25 years and retired and decided to take everything that I had learned by holding hands and sharing space and conversations and credential through the life coaching process to really begin to work with people one-on-one in a different modality, but using the same ingredients. And so I have really enjoyed the spiritual aspect to it because I've been such a spiritual person my entire life that it added another layer to the life coaching. So it's been super cool. So that's a little bit about who I am. And you can find me at Magical Maven 2 on Instagram. And I'm in the process of building a website. So if you're interested in learning about me, you can check that out, or you can email me at magicalmaven@yahoo.com for more information.
Perfect. Thank you for that. Okay, we will dive into the questions. The first one is, why do you think spiritual health is important?
I think that spiritual health is important because when I think of spirituality, it is a connection between myself and either an external spiritual aspect, whether it's nature or another human being or your religion or anything that's on the outside. But I think more importantly, it's that connection back to yourself, that aspect of yourself that is sacred and that is a lot of times unconsciously not around, that's kind of like in the back burner. So when we're able to really connect with that, it's a really healthy place to be because you're fully present in a lot of stuff when you're able to connect. And I think that there's health benefits to that.
I'm excited to learn more about that throughout these questions. How has your spiritual health positively affected your perspective and then your career and then your life choices?
About 14 years ago, had a situation where I woke up one Mother's Day having 2 kids and found myself in a lot of pain and realized through a series of appointments and events that I had 4 herniated discs out of nowhere. Now, mind you, I was in a horrible relationship with my husband at the time, who I divorced, and it was very verbally abusive and emotionally abusive. And when we look at the spiritual aspects of our spine, this area holds our voice, but it also holds our relationships. And I really think that me leaving the relationship and when my discs blew was a spiritual revolution for me, where I was forced to have a choice. And so for me, I've had a lot of spiritual awakenings, but that was a huge spiritual awakening that forced me to have to take a look at my health in a way that was far more prevalent to my mental health, my self-help, my self-care, boundaries, all these health things that people really don't talk about that were essentially I was ignoring and they were being destroyed. So that was like the first thing that I really started to become connected to spiritually and started to pay more attention to. And that process took me down a completely different road of how I live my life now versus how I had lived my life before. So that was the first thing when it came to my health.
And then how did that affect your career? It sounds like it definitely did here.
I think it really started forcing me to reevaluate how I conducted myself in business as a manicurist. It forced me to have to really think about how I held myself, my demeanor, how I would, as an empath, I had to learn how to not take everything inside and really come up with a way that I felt protected, spiritually protected, having some kind of a shield to deflect energies that were not going to be good for me to absorb and to take home with me. Anytime we're in a business or we're out or there's we're around people, that energy exists, even if you cannot see it. And I think that there's a lot of spiritual components to that on how to protect yourselves. I really had to start to think about how to protect myself in a way that I wasn't taking everything in, but just being able to kind of rinse after every client in a purification way. Also by washing my hands, but also in a purifying way, like ending it and returning to sender and having more spiritual protection for me and for the person that I was working with. And I found that the minute I started to connect back to the unconscious part of me that was really in dire need of that connection, everything else started to connect. And I got reconnected to my husband now, who I had known as a young adult in Israel when I was living there. And so the minute you start to shift something, everything else shifts. And the universe really works in bizarre ways on how to re-engage and reconnect you to aspects that you didn't even know were in play. But they are, we just can't see them. So it affected every aspect of my life. It affected how I parented, it affected how I conducted my business. It affected how I viewed myself. It affects everything, plays into it. It's the domino effect.
I love that. And that is so in line with what I was telling a client last night, just about how when we are open to things, doors open. Suddenly these opportunities come that we have been waiting years for. They're there. Okay, the next question is, how do you think it ties in with the other areas of wellness?
I think first and foremost, it's reconnecting back to that pure godlike energy that we each come into this world with. And I think that when we are able to really dial in and connect to that, it transfers into everything else because we become more truthful. We become more in alignment. We figure out what our baseline is and then how to either build the values and the beliefs and the other things that we want to do out of it, versus when we're not connected to that aspect, we're kind of blinded by what we're doing. We're not paying attention. So I think that when we're really connected to ourself, it allows us to see things differently when we are not. That's just my belief. And so I think that there's a lot of transparency that comes with it. And when we know differently, we do differently. And when we know, I don't want to say better, but for me, knowing what my health meant to me from a spiritual component forced me to have to choose better because I knew better and I knew differently. So it imposed itself in every other aspect of my life.
Love that you talked about how emotions can get trapped in different areas of our bodies, because there is actual science to back this up.
Yes, there is.
And it's something that I felt for a while, but reading about it in the scientific community is like, yes. What do you think the signs are that you are neglecting your spiritual health? I feel like you will have a lot of information about this.
I think that when we are not spiritually connected, or when we can feel, we feel it emotionally, we feel it physically, we become lethargic, we choose to do things that often will sabotage ourselves instead of nurturing and growing and allowing us to evolve. It will feel like we are on the wheel where you're exhausting yourself and you have nothing to show for it. You're going nowhere. Also, I say take a look at who you're hanging out with, because your environment is a telltale sign to if you are becoming spiritually deprived or you're not feeling that connection that you have to yourself or honoring yourself, because your environment will show you very clearly. We as humans, though, don't really want to see the signs because it forces us to have to change, which is so difficult. Usually we know, we're just so afraid. We're so afraid to, raise our hand and be like, I need help. Like someone turn the light on. When you feel like you need someone to turn the light on, that's like another telltale sign. What is going on that you need somebody to turn the light on? This could be like a conversation back and forth, because I would love to hear your thought on it. But I think that there's so many signs, numbers in a car, songs on a radio. If you keep hearing the same sad song over and over again, every time you get in the car, that might be an indicator to pay attention to the words, or, seeing numbers that are showing up for you all the time. So I believe numerology is another component to a spiritual aspect, a universal aspect that's trying to get your attention. So what is it that's trying to get your attention?
In the church, we talk a lot about, so using my Christian background here, I made sure that I found someone who was not Christian faith, so we would get both sides here, that we are given the same trials over and over again, sometimes because we are not learning that lesson. Actually, not sometimes, oftentimes it's for this reason. How do you talked about rinsing, you were rinsing in between your clients and just not holding on to their emotions and just trying to release them. How do you release these?
So normally any session I go into, whether it's a spiritual coaching session, a life coaching session, whether I'm reading cards or doing energy work, I'm a Reiki master. So any type of work that I am doing with somebody else, I first start out by imagining myself in a bubble of pure white, angelic, divine light. So whatever that color is for you, whether it's golden or it's white or it's translucent, whatever connects you to that source that is your divine, that is your God energy, whether it's the Great Spirit or whatever it is for you. For me, I surround myself in this white light and I feel very safe and purified and protected. And so I hold myself in that space. And then when I'm done, I imagine being bathed in it, being washed after this bubble is done, using its protection. It's like a balloon popping for me. And I just feel like I'm getting rinsed. I also physically, I shower twice a day. I get up and I shower, and I go and shower in the end of the day to rinse the day off. And it's just rinsing, because there's some quality with water that is purifying, and water holds molecules that can be changed. So you can be standing in a physical shower and ask for a blessing or a prayer from whatever religion you subscribe to or whatever belief, and ask for it to be blessed. And the water, even without physically touching the water, can transpose and be used as sacred, So for me, it's really about finding what that source of the Almighty, that God-like essence for the individual is, and using it as a bathing, as a purification. I mean, there's so many things. Selenite is a crystal. It is a great crystal to use. It comes in like long, white, huge chunks. And I use that as just another, it's like divine, beautiful, angelic energy. And so a lot of times if I'm working with people, I'll make them hold on to the selenite as just a way to purify. So there's so many ways to do it.
It reminded me, there was a woman that we went to learn how to do couples massage. And she said she just had a really hard day. So she was burning sage through the house right before when we first walked in. But it was just great that she wanted it to be on this neutral, clean ground for us. What do you think the signs are for other people that they are neglecting their spiritual health?
One of the biggest signs is I don't know. When someone is constantly, I don't know, I don't know, I don't know, I don't know. I think to me that is just a lack of connection to themselves and being present. If you're not present and aware of what is going on around anywhere, how are you going to know? And so I think it is a form of disassociation and non-attachment in an unhealthy way, as a form of avoidance. So that to me is a telltale sign. Another thing is, I think that when they're unsure of their voice, when they're unsure of their truth, of their belief system, somebody who I find to be spiritually connected comes across as very knowing and knowingness to themselves. And somebody who is not spiritually connected, that quality is diminished, or it seems to be timid. Also, lack of inspiration, lack of passion. Their dreams, they don't have dreams. Like, to me, when I think of spirituality, being able to dream or be passionate about something. So when that's lacking, I question that too.
Are you ready to make life changes, make lasting progress in areas of your life where you have only made band-aid fixes before? I help people who are stuck in life transitions create balance, find fulfillment, and transition into the life they were afraid to reach for. I currently have room for 2 weekly one-on-one coaching clients. Head over to wellnessinEverySeason.com to schedule a free coaching consult. What can others do to strengthen this area if they are in a deficit?
I think the first thing one can do to strengthen themselves if they're in a deficit is to really find a quiet place and sit with themselves and be present with yourself. And if it means taking your hands and putting them over your heart to hear your heartbeat, or finding the pulse on your neck to connect back to yourself, but really sit with yourself. Ask yourself what you need. A lot of times messages will come to us intuitively. So that's a way. Also, being outside in nature. I think nature is a strong component of nourishment. Putting your feet on the grass, feeling the ground, feeling the vibration of earth is very important in that connection. The other thing I always say is being of service. I think being of service is probably one of the most fundamental, strongest things you can do when you're in deficit, because when you get out of yourself and you give back and you're of service, it's automatically going to make you feel good and remind you of those things that are so beautiful about yourself. I think it's really important, and something that we forget in this day and age is how important it is for us as people to be of service, because we started off in our world in ancient times in tribes and in groups where we all worked together. It was a collaborative, and now we all sit in our homes by ourselves, and it can be very isolating. And service is a great aspect of that. As we heal out, we heal in.
What do you do to check up on your own spiritual wellness?
Part of my spiritual wellness is taking care of myself. And if I'm not taking care of myself, then I'm not capable of really applying it to other facets of my life. So one of the things is I really allow myself to meditate, but I don't think of like the meditation as like the regular. I just like to be quiet with myself and hear myself think, and bypass the negative chatter and bring forth, the good things. And in that aspect, I think that there's something really beautiful about telling yourself that you're okay, that you are safe, that you're beautiful, that you're good, that you're right, that you've got yourself. And I learned that from my healer. And I think that those are just some of the things that I like to do. I'm very much a crystal person, so working and using crystals is another part of my spiritual care, because it's a connection to Mother Earth from a source and working with them. I like to be outside. Being in Michigan in the winters are long. Thankfully, I don't suffer from depression, or like seasonal depression, but reading to me is, I love reading. So that's a part of my spiritual care, is reading something that is going to nurture and enrich myself, because I want to be able to, use it as a way to connect externally. So, I mean, like my whole life is spiritual. Like between the way I cook my food, I Reiki it, and I cook listening to love songs. And I don't like eating out because the kitchens always look so manic and crazy and the chef is screaming. I don't want to eat that. So in my home, I cook with love, and that's part of my spiritual practice. And I clean with love, and my home has love in it. And those things are really important for me. So those are all like my self-care spiritual tools that I do. And also really, really connecting to my spouse and my child authentically, and laughter. Laughter is a huge component. So anything I do is going to be spiritual, and it's going to be self-care.
I really love where you said that it's the things that bring you happiness, because there's so many things that we should ourselves into. We should be doing this. We should be doing that. And as moms, there's the mom guilt, and that's become a trending hashtag for a reason. We have all these shoulds that we give ourselves. What about the things that are wholesome that bring us happiness? I love that. That was pretty profound for me, just thinking about how we are preparing our food. I've thought about that through my degree in applied health, but just the background music and the feelings that you're having, not just the wholesomeness of the actual content in your food.
It's so funny because, you talk about mother guilt and the shaming that's going on. And when you and I were chatting and I read over the stuff, if I could go back and do over again in raising my children, would be to be more in alignment with my core self, because I spent so much time putting Marcie on the back burner in order to be an effective parent, that my parenting was not effective at all. And so I think that knowing who I am today at 53, and knowing who I am as a human being, as a woman, as a mother, as a wife, but more importantly, like this who I am right now, presently, I would make sure how connected to myself I was. And if it meant 5 minutes of taking that for myself, to do it, because it's so important for the connection that you have with your children. Because if you are lacking that connection with yourself, it's going to play out in everything else. As mothers, we shouldn't be shaming each other. We should be encouraging and building each other up. That's what we did years ago. It took a village to raise a family, and we all did it collectively and together.
There are scientific articles about how isolated we are and how it is affecting all the systems in our body. Definitely depression right there. But it should take a village to raise a child, and you should be working on, here's the shoulds here, erecting this village, strengthening it, growing your village, because when things happen, when you need those 5 minutes, you might need somebody to jump in for those 5 minutes for you. And if nobody's there, and I'm sure that you know this even more so because you said that you were divorced. And I know this because my husband works 45 minutes from home, so when something happens, I need to be able to call on somebody else. And it's something that I definitely think about every school year when I'm filling out okay, if I can't be contacted, who's the next in line? It's not technically going to be my husband because he's further away from our home. So we need to be thinking about who's the emergency contact, and who else, and how are you building this village? And I also thought about, I really enjoy exercise, and part of that is yoga in my week. And what I've learned through yoga is the power in being curious. And if we are in a stage of being curious, we're not in a stage of shooting ourselves or feeling guilty or holding on to things where this isn't quite working. What can I do to make this different? Or, this is happening right now. And the power in taking a breath and spending a little bit of time in meditation, especially when the kids have been off the wall. That morning, I have this time back to myself where I can realign myself, where I can feel energy, I can release energy. It's amazing. And you have me thinking about all the things that I'm doing right and the little tweaks that I need to do here. And I'm really loving this. How can others be preventative?
Figure out how you hear your gut and what your gut instincts sound and feel like. Stepping into a place where you know isn't good, but yet you show up anyway. You can prevent that by knowing it's not good and deciding, it's having healthy boundaries. What are your boundaries? Are your boundaries sloppy? Are they not working for your highest benefit? So it's figuring out your values, your beliefs, your morals, your ethics, and questioning them from an aspect of spirituality. Is it in alignment with your honest, most beautiful self, that sacred aspect? Or showing up for yourself first before you show up for the question, and asking yourself, would you do this? And if your self says, no, I wouldn't, then your ego will, because I think a lot of times we make decisions that are not from an egotistical way, but our ego. It's really just about finding the grace and asking that place of how it's going to make you feel. And if it's going to make you feel less than, is it worth going ahead and doing it? And I think that's also a preventative.
I think this is where, if you want to have preventative, and especially if you're struggling, this is where life coaching is, because we are asking you questions to help you dig deeper and to discover what these answers are. Because I know when I was 18 years old and moved out of my abusive home, I didn't know who I was. I didn't know where I stood. I had so much decision fatigue that I would be calling friends to make this decision for me.
I love that. Decision fatigue. That is the best.
We struggle sometimes, especially when we have made so many decisions throughout the day where we're just exhausted. So we need to be definitely, as you've been talking about, filling our cup so that it is not running empty. And this is something that I say all the time, is filling our cup, because there's so many times where we're supposed to give something and there's not a drip in there of that water, to give to somebody else, or that oil, or however you want to think of it. When we don't take the time to do these things, we're lost. How can we help other people? How can we best show up if we're not showing up, if we're not asking ourselves the questions, if we're not forming our boundaries ahead of time? Because there's so many times where we get into a situation and that doesn't feel good, but we don't have that boundary set. So we're not sure where we need to be on this line of whatever the subject is or whatever is happening around us.
Yeah, that's so interesting, because I think a lot of times when we make decisions from a place of exhaustion, whether it's emotion, spiritual, mental, physical, the decisions that we are going to form at that moment aren't going to be accurate decisions. Versus if we're well rested, we're well fed, we are in a place of content, we're good, then when someone or we need to make a decision, that decision is going to be informed. So anytime we're working from a place of deficit, you're going to end up in deficit. Like 0 equals 0. You don't need to be a mathematician in order to figure that out. The other thing I like to impose is, we talk about filling this container. What does this container look like? Do you have holes in your container? And if there are, why are the holes there? What is leaking? Because a lot of times you can take a container that has no bottom, and no matter how much you pour into it, it's always going to be in an empty state. So as much as I think that it's important to fill the container, tell me about the container, because I want to know what the container looks like. What is your container made out of, and how whole is it? How much have you created for it to be whole? Because there's some people that no matter what they do, they will never be satisfied. They're never going to be happy. They're never going to feel nourished. They're always going to keep looking for the next best or the next thing. And those are the ones that are draining the person that is with them, because no matter what they do, it's always going to end up empty. So even before you begin figuring out how to fill the container, you need to examine how that container looks. What does it look like? Does it need an update? Does it need to be, patched up with gold in order to purify it?
Who is it that when something breaks, they put gold in it?
The Japanese. It is the most beautiful thing. Mm-hmm.
Love that. And then I never thought about it that way, like are there cracks in your container? Are there holes? I love that. But when you are doing this, do it from a place of curiosity, not beating yourself up. Let's make sure and have that disclaimer in there. 100%.
100%. Because when we are doing the sacred work, because I view coaching as sacred. I think coaching is a very sacred aspect. It is about really peeling the layers and the onion of yourself in a way that is very, very nurturing to the most beautiful thing that is underneath each layer. And anyone who feels criticized or judged in doing this work either has to assess the environment they're choosing to be in while they're doing it, even if it's themselves or the person that they're choosing to do it with, because it should feel like you want to continue doing the work because you feel safe and you feel like you can show your layers and you can show the meat of it and not feel ashamed by it or scared or afraid how the person on the other end of it is going to react to it.
And sometimes when I'm doing the work, it's myself, like you're saying. And that is how you know, as I talked about in the very first episode, when you need to see a therapist or be coached, this is how you know the difference. If this is something that's really holding you back and it's something in your past, that's therapy right there.
Yeah.
But we can really help you peel back the layers and see the beauty and how to move forward with coaching. And sometimes it needs to be hand in hand. And that's fine. That's part of you being the whole person because you come with a past.
Absolutely. And it's part of your growth process. When you look at a plant, when you look at, first you need the pot, you need the dirt, you need, the hands that do it. There's so many components to it. It's the same with us.
Any last thoughts as we start to wrap this up?
I just think that spiritual coaching is a really cool aspect because, again, like I said in the beginning, sometimes we come in because we have a lack of connection and we're looking for that connection. And spirituality, spiritual coaching can be a great aspect, but it also could be a door turning into something else. And so sometimes what we think what we need is usually there's so many other facets that go on to it. And with the spiritual coaching, there's so many, just like life coaching, there's so many aspects to it. And there's so many different facets that I think it's really important in our experience here as human beings because it softens us and it connects us to each other and to the world around us and to the universe that encapsulates us.
I really love that. And what I really am enjoying about coaching is that we as a coach are on the journey with you as you are discovering yourself. We're just there asking the questions and helping to hold you accountable and pointing out what you're saying isn't matching with what we try to do it in person so that we can see your face. So it's live. So what you're saying is not matching what you're showing physically. Like you're grimacing while you're saying this and you're saying that it brings you joy. Like there's something here. Let's dig a little deeper. It's amazing seeing the journey and how it unfolds. And it is very much like a flower slowly opening up. And it's just a joy to be able to see. All right. So we know that we can find you at magicalmaven@yahoo.com. So email magicalmaven2 on Instagram. And she was talking about her ideal client before we started recording. And she was talking, what I wrote down was deep, gritty work. She really likes to get deep with people. Can you tell us a little bit more about that so that the people who are really feeling connected to you through this can find you and that they know, like, yes, she's speaking to me?
I have the capacity to sit in a space that can go really deep and peel those layers and feel that emotion and, be able to I've never been a surface person. So it's for me to be a coach and be a surface coach, it's not going to work. I like connecting. I like really just getting to that grit. That's where life is taking place. And I really just like being in that deep water with somebody. And I think part of it is because I'm a Scorpio, so I'm deep by nature and I'm curious and I'm expressive and I'm passionate. And when I think of those qualities, that is like what I think of when coaching in that deep grit place. There's a lot of curiosity and passion and emotion. And that's my jam.
Wow, you have given me so many thoughts and ideas through this. I am so grateful that you have taken the time to meet with me and that this is our first chance to really meet because I feel such a connection with you already. Thank you so much. I hope everybody else does because
yeah.
And I wish that you could see just her amazing face. You will, if you follow her on Instagram, you'll see her amazing face there and see how beautiful she is. And there's no way she looks 53, by the way. And you just have such a light about you. And thank you for doing this. It's been amazing. Yes.
It's my spirituality.
There you go. Thank you again, Marcie Reznik. To go ahead and tie this off, I am going to give you some questions that I like to use within my practice that are questions that came from the Life Purpose Institute's school, and then questions from the National Institute of Wellness, and then we will go ahead and summarize everything that we learned today. What does it mean to be a spiritual being? How can I feel more connected to myself, others, and God in my everyday life? How can I serve and make a contribution to the world? And then here are the questions from the National Institute of Wellness. And this is their self-assessment. 1 being almost never, 2 being rarely, 3 being sometimes, 4 being often, and 5 being almost always. And I definitely recommend pen and paper for all of these questions, including the ones that I gave you before. I feel that my life has a sense of direction or meaning to it. And then this is your agreement score. I have a sense of peace about my life and my place in the world, your agreement score. I accept events and others as they are and do not make judgments, agreement score. I feel a sense of connectedness with all other living things, agreement score. Prayer and or meditation are a regular part of my daily routine, agreement score. I live each day in a way that is consistent with my values, agreement score. And then go ahead and give yourself on a scale of 1 to being low and 10 being high. How would you rate your overall satisfaction with where you are in this dimension? Health was essential to her well-being and how it positively influences her perspective, career, and life choices. We explored how spiritual wellness was interconnected with other areas of wellness, and she highlighted the science of neglecting this important area of our lives. Marcie also discussed the measures she took to maintain her spiritual wellness and how others could strengthen their spiritual health while preventing a spiritual debt in this area. Next week, we will have another special guest discussing physical wellness, so please subscribe to know when it goes live. Thank you so much. Thank you for joining our wellness discussion this week with Autumn Carter. If you liked what you heard, follow me on Instagram at Moms Wellness in every season to keep up with the latest wellness tips for moms. Please share the podcast love with others by sharing, subscribing, and leaving a review wherever you listen to podcasts. If you want a topic covered in more detail or a free coaching consultation, please DM me on Instagram or send an email through my website, wellnessinEverySeason.com. I look forward to connecting with